The Galactic Empire had ruled for thousands of years, stretching across the stars like an unbreakable iron chain. No species had ever truly challenged them. Worlds bent the knee, or they were burned to nothing. The Tar Dominion, the rulers of this vast empire, saw themselves as gods among lesser creatures. Their fleets were unmatched, their technology centuries beyond the grasp of primitive species. And yet, a rumor had begun to spread, a whisper among the outer colonies, a name spoken in hushed tones. Earth, a small, insignificant planet, a species that had entered the galactic stage only a few centuries ago. By all accounts, they should have been nothing, a minor race struggling to catch up. The Empire should have crushed them without effort. But something was off. It started with disappearances. Imperial scout ships sent to observe Sol, Earth's home system, never returned. Surveillance probes went silent the moment they entered the system. Patrols near the border reported strange readings, ghost signals, impossible energy fluctuations, and ships appearing and disappearing without a trace. The Empire scoffed at the notion of human strength. How could a race so young pose any kind of threat? No one had ever seen Earth's military in action. No records existed of their warships. And yet, the rumors persisted. The high command of the Empire dismissed these as myths, superstitions spread by frightened officers. There was no fleet. There were no superweapons, just another primitive species that needed to be put in its place. So, the Empire decided to act. A fleet was dispatched, not just any fleet, but a battle group of 200 warships, led by the ruthless Admiral Carvox. His orders were simple: invade Sol, demand unconditional surrender, and, if necessary, reduce Earth to ash. The fleet moved with supreme confidence. As they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sol, they expected to see a scrambling, desperate species, unprepared for war. They expected Earth's forces to panic at the sight of Imperial might. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong. The system was silent. No warships moved to intercept them. No planetary defenses locked onto them. Even the long-range scanners picked up nothing but empty space. For the first time, doubt crept into Admiral Carvox's mind. Where were the humans? Even the weakest species at least tried to resist. Still, he was a man of action. He ordered the fleet forward. Slowly, cautiously, they'd moved deeper into Sol. Mars came into view. No orbital defenses, no stations, no movement. They passed Jupiter's moons. Again, nothing. By the time they reached the asteroid belt, tension gripped every officer aboard the Imperial ships. This wasn't normal. This was a trap. And then, it happened. A whisper across the fleet's comm channels. A sound that should have been impossible. A voice. One word, spoken in perfect, clear Imperial standard. Leave. Silence followed. The Imperial officers looked at one another in confusion. Who had sent the message? No human ships were in sight. No transmissions had been detected before this. And yet, every single warship in the fleet had received the same message at the exact same moment. Admiral Carvox clenched his jaw. Find the source of that signal. The technicians worked furiously, scanning every wavelength, analyzing every frequency. Nothing. It had come from everywhere and nowhere. Carvox sneered. They think they can scare us. Prepare the fleet. Move forward. Charge weapons. The command was relayed. The ships advanced. And then the screams began. One by one, ships vanished from the fleet's formation. No explosions, no debris, no enemy fire. They were simply gone. Admiral Carvox's command ship received frantic distress signals. Officers yelling, terrified. One captain screamed, "Something is in here with us. We can't see them." There. And then silence. The ship was gone. Panic spread through the fleet. Reverse course. Emergency jump. An officer cried. No, we stand and fight. Fire at anything suspicious. Carvox bellowed. The fleet obeyed, opening fire blindly into space. Lances of plasma and streams of high-energy railgun rounds tore through the void. They hit nothing. And then they saw it. A shape emerging from the darkness. Not one, not two, dozens. Colossal warships, their black hulls absorbing light. Their designs unlike anything in the Empire's records. No engine trails, no power signatures. The Dreadnought fleet had arrived. Carvox had always believed in the superiority of the Empire. He had never known fear. But now, as he stared into the abyss, he was afraid. Admiral Carvox watched in horror as the colossal black warships emerged from the void. These were no ordinary vessels. They were behemoths, their surfaces shifting like living shadows, as if space itself bent around them. No engine trails, no power signatures, no transmissions. The humans had not just hidden their fleet, they had become ghosts in the dark. A deathly silence spread across the Imperial channels. Officers stared at their screens, waiting for orders, but no one knew what to do. Then, in a single instant, hell was unleashed. A massive shockwave rippled through space. The lead Imperial battleship shattered into fragments before anyone could react. No explosion, no warning. One moment it was there. The next, it was nothing but twisted metal drifting through the void. Incoming fire, a panicked officer shouted. But from where? The human ships had not fired any visible weapons. There were no missile trails, no plasma bursts, just invisible destruction tearing through the Imperial fleet. Another ship, an Imperial Dreadnought, was suddenly ripped in half as if an unseen hand had crushed it from the inside. Debris spiraled outward, taking out smaller vessels in the process. Admiral Carvox gripped the edges of his command throne. His blood ran cold. This wasn't war. This was a massacre. Fire everything. Now, he roared. The Imperial fleet opened fire in every direction. Plasma cannons blazed, railguns thundered, and torpedoes shrieked into the void. The darkness ahead of them lit up like a supernova. And yet, the human ships absorbed everything. The weapons should have been enough to obliterate entire moons, but they simply vanished upon impact, as if space itself had swallowed them whole. "Our weapons are useless," an officer screamed. Before Carvox could respond, a new nightmare unfolded. The human fleet moved. They were fast, too fast. Impossible for ships of their size. One moment, they were in the distance. The next, they were right on top of the Imperial warships. The first boarding pods struck. The impact sent tremors through the Imperial cruisers, not from explosions, but from something worse. Within seconds, hundreds of human soldiers breached the Imperial ships. And then, the screams began. Carvox's command ship received desperate transmissions. Security teams cut down in seconds, weapons fire echoing through the halls. Something was hunting them, and it wasn't stopping. "They have combat exosuits. We can't." AARG. A transmission cut out in static. Carvox's stomach twisted. He had fought in countless wars, but never against something like this. He turned to his officers. "Get us out of here. Emergency hyperspace jump. Now." "Sir, the navigational systems. They're locked." "Locked? Impossible." Then, over the fleet's comm channel, a voice spoke. Calm, cold, unforgiving. "You entered Sol without permission. You will not leave." The dread hit Carvox like a hammer. Earth's AI had hijacked their systems. They were trapped. More human ships uncloaked around them. There was no way out. Carvox clenched his fists. The fleet had to fight, even if it was hopeless. "Send a transmission to the Empire," he ordered. "Tell them, Earth is not defenseless." The message was sent, but Carvox knew it was already too late. The transmission spread like wildfire. The Imperial High Command, seated within the grand citadel of Celtar Prime, The Empire's throne world received Admiral Carvox's final message. It was impossible. It had to be a mistake. No species had ever resisted the Empire's military might, let alone annihilated an entire battle fleet. The humans were nothing more than an upstart race, barely scratching the surface of spacefaring technology. And yet, the transmission played over and over, showing the destruction of the Imperial fleet. The high generals and senators stood in silence. These were not battle wounds from an evenly matched fight. This was not a costly victory earned with sacrifice. This was extermination. Then, the real nightmare began. It started with ghost signals appearing across the outer colonies. Communication systems flickered. Messages arrived before they were even sent, as if time itself was unraveling. Planetary defense grids glitched, turning on and off at random. Entire security fleets went offline for precisely 6 seconds, just long enough for something to slip through undetected. There was no declaration of war, no demands, no sign of where the enemy was. Then, one by one, Imperial worlds began to go silent. The Empire first dismissed it as a technical failure, a malfunction in the deep space relays. But then reports came in from survivors. Horrified whispers of the impossible. Ships appearing out of nowhere. Entire garrisons wiped out before they could send distress signals. Defenses that should have been impenetrable turned to dust in the blink of an eye. No invaders seen. No battles fought. By the time the Empire realized what was happening, 12 core worlds had already fallen. The Galactic Senate was thrown into chaos. Some demanded an immediate counterattack, but how do you fight an enemy you cannot see? Others proposed surrender. Maybe if they begged for mercy, the humans would let them live. Those voices were quickly silenced by fear. Then came the moment that shattered whatever illusion of control the Empire had left. A lone human dreadnought entered Imperial space. Just one. It was detected the moment it arrived, hovering over Xeltar Prime, the Empire's most fortified planet. It did not fire. It did not move. It simply existed. The Imperial Armada scrambled. Thousands of warships surrounded the single enemy vessel. Orders were given to destroy it. But the moment they locked weapons onto it, every Imperial warship shut down. Engines failed. Weapons systems collapsed. Shields flickered and died. Thousands of ships powerless, floating in the void. Panic erupted. Crews desperately tried to reboot systems, override security locks. Nothing worked. Then a message played, not on their comms, but directly inside their minds. Your time is over. Surrender or be erased. The words echoed across the entire Empire, every planet, every outpost, every ship. The humans had not just mastered war. They had mastered fear. Emperor Valzur stood in silence, his golden robes flowing around him as he stared at the massive holomap in front of him. Red lights blinked out one by one, each marking a fallen world, a shattered fleet, or a lost communication hub. The Empire was crumbling. A power that had ruled the stars for thousands of years was being ripped apart, and the worst part was that no one even knew how to fight back. The humans had not launched a traditional war. There were no front lines, no drawn-out battles, no negotiations. There was only silence, and then annihilation. His most trusted admirals had been reduced to desperate, shaking wrecks. His highest generals, once proud and arrogant, now whispered about surrender. But Emperor Valzur was no coward. He would not let his empire die like this. If the humans were ghosts in the dark, then he would force them into the light. His voice rang through the Imperial war chamber. Summon the Harbinger fleet. A wave of gasps spread through the room. The Harbinger fleet had not been deployed in over 1,000 years. It was the Empire's last resort, a doomsday armada of planet-killer warships, hidden away in the void, designed to wage wars of extinction. The fleet had only one purpose: to erase civilizations from existence. Your Majesty, one of his ministers stammered, if we unleash the Harbingers, there will be no coming back from this. Entire systems, Billions will be turned to ash. The Emperor's piercing yellow eyes glowed with fury. Then let the stars burn. If we cannot rule the galaxy, then neither will they. The order was given. Deep in the forgotten corners of Imperial space, thousands of massive warships came to life. Their hulls were ancient, their weapons powered by unstable energies that had been forbidden by the Senate long ago. They had been built for one purpose: total destruction. The Emperor's plan was simple. He would lure the humans out. He knew they protected their own. He knew they cared for their people. If the Empire started wiping out entire star systems, the humans would be forced to reveal themselves. And then, the Emperor would strike them with all the fury of a dying empire. But he underestimated them. The Harbinger fleet launched. Hundreds of inhabited worlds were targeted. Cities burned. Planets shattered. Trillions of innocent lives were lost. The Emperor stood at the command center, watching as world after world was erased. The humans would have no choice now. And then they answered. It began with a ripple in space, a distortion so unnatural that Imperial sensors couldn't understand it. And then, the void itself split open. The human fleet emerged, not from hyperspace, not from any known method of travel. They simply stepped out of nothingness. But it was not just their dreadnoughts this time. This time, they brought something far worse. From the darkness, titanic constructs of pure energy emerged. They were not ships. They were not machines. They were something beyond technology, beyond science. The Empire's greatest minds had believed the humans were using advanced cloaking devices. They had believed the humans had merely evolved faster than expected. They were wrong. The humans had transcended. They were no longer bound by the same rules of physics, by the same limitations of time and space. The weapons of the Harbinger fleet fired at full force, but they did nothing. The human warforms moved through the destruction untouched. And then, they spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but directly into the minds of every living being in the Empire. You have chosen extinction, and now we will grant your wish. The Emperor, for the first time in his long life, felt something he had never known before: terror. The stars burned with the wreckage of 1,000 shattered warships. The void trembled as the final battle began. This was it, the moment where everything would be decided. Humanity had fought impossible odds before, but never like this. Never against an enemy so vast, so unrelenting. The Harbinger fleet, the Empire's ultimate weapon, stood before them. Its warships stretched across the system, an ocean of darkness blotting out the light of the distant sun. Each vessel was a planet killer, armed with weapons capable of ripping entire solar systems apart. Yet humanity did not run. Their dreadnought fleet, their last remaining force, stood defiant. Heavily armored, cloaked in living shadows, powered by technologies that defied physics itself. But even with all their advancements, they were still outnumbered 100 to 1. Admiral Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the HNS Vengeance, his expression grim but unwavering. Around him, his officers worked in complete silence. There was no fear, no hesitation, only purpose. They had all known this day would come. A transmission from the Imperial flagship came through. The cold, calculated voice of Emperor Veil-Zur filled the command deck. You cannot win. You should have surrendered when you had the chance. Kane exhaled slowly, staring at the enemy fleet before him. We never needed a chance. We only needed a reason. With a single motion, he gave the order. And the final battle began. The human dreadnoughts vanished into the void. The Empire's sensors scrambled, struggling to lock onto their signatures. They had faced cloaking technology before, but this was different. This was not invisibility. This was erasure. Then, chaos. The first wave of Imperial warships exploded without warning. Massive cruisers and battleships, their hulls reinforced with neutronium, simply ceased to exist. 1 second they were there. The next, only burning debris remained. The Empire retaliated. Millions of plasma cannons unleashed hell, turning the battlefield into a storm of fire and destruction. But the human ships moved like phantoms, dodging attacks before they were even fired. They were not reacting to the battle. They were predicting it. The Harbinger fleet deployed its ultimate weapons, gravity bombs that could crush planets, reality warping torpedoes that ripped holes in time itself. And yet, humanity endured. They struck back, not with overwhelming firepower, but with precision. Each attack crippled the Empire's forces, cutting through their formations like a scalpel through flesh. For the first time in its history, the Empire felt fear. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, the Emperor watched his fleet collapse. His unstoppable war machine, his undefeatable empire, it was all falling apart. He had one last move, one final gamble. His warship, the Titan Ascendant, the largest battleship ever built, began charging its primary weapon, a stellar annihilator. If fired, it would consume the entire system in fire. If the Empire could not rule, then it would burn everything to ash. Kane saw it. He understood what was about to happen. This wasn't just a battle. This was the end. His hands tightened into fists. No, not yet. Humanity had not come this far to fall now. He turned to his crew. All power to the main cannon. Target the Titan Ascendant. The Vengeance turned, its hull glowing as it channeled every last ounce of energy into its primary weapon. This was their last shot. The Empire fired first. A blinding beam of energy, powerful enough to consume a star, tore through space. Everything in its path was erased. But before it could reach its target, humanity fired back. The two forces collided in the darkness of space. The explosion that followed shattered the heavens. And when the light faded, the Titan Ascendant was gone. The Emperor was dead. The battle was over. And humanity had won. The silence after the battle was deafening. The void, once filled with the roars of war, now stood still, littered with the wreckage of a fallen empire. Broken warships drifted aimlessly, their shattered hulls reflecting the dim glow of distant stars. The once mighty Galactic Empire, an unchallenged ruler of the cosmos, was now nothing more than fading embers in the dark. Humanity had won, but victory did not bring celebration. Admiral Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the HNS Vengeance, gazing at the ruins before him. His hands gripped the console, his knuckles white. They had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. But as he watched the remnants of the Imperial fleet burn, a cold realization settled over him. This was not just a battle. This was a warning. The Empire had ruled with fear. It had crushed entire civilizations, wiped out entire species, believing itself invincible. And yet, in the end, it was fear that had undone them. The moment they had learned of humanity's true power, they had panicked. They had thrown everything they had into the fight, not out of strategy, but out of desperation. And now, that same fear would spread beyond the ruins of the Empire. The galaxy had watched this war unfold. Countless species, once trembling before the might of the Empire, had seen how it had been reduced to dust. They had seen what humanity was capable of, and they would never forget. A transmission came through, breaking the heavy silence. It was from the surviving remnants of the Empire, fragments of the once great armada, scattered and leaderless. Their message was not a request for surrender. It was a plea for mercy. Please, we yield. Do not erase us. Kane closed his eyes for a long moment. He could still hear the screams of the fallen, the echoes of entire planets burning. He thought of Earth, of what had been lost in this war. Humanity had fought for survival, not conquest. But now, the galaxy would never see it that way. From this day forward, they would not see humans as allies or equals. They would see them as something else entirely. Something to be feared. Kane exhaled and opened his eyes. His voice was steady when he finally spoke. We are not executioners. The surviving Imperials were spared, but they would never rise again. The great empire that had once ruled the stars was gone, and in its place, a new order was beginning to take shape. But it was not an order of peace. It was an order built on whispers in the dark, on warnings passed between civilizations. Across the galaxy, species spoke of the war, of the force that had destroyed the unbreakable empire. They did not call them conquerors. They did not call them saviors. They called them something else. They called them monsters. And so the war ended, but something far greater had begun. The age of the empire was over, and the age of fear had begun.